question, just something you can share related to a favorite vacation or even an upcoming trip that you are really, really looking forward to. I know that we've never been to Napa Valley, so we're going to go over spring break and we're really looking forward to doing that. So that's just really about a month or so away. So we'll just kind of take volunteers. So favorite vacation spots or upcoming vacations that you all have planned? Nothing. Nobody?
One of my very favorite vacations that I've ever been on, it was just me and my mom did a week in New Orleans. Between, like right before I started grad school. And it was just the right combination of excellent food and quality time with her, and also really interesting tours that just made it hit all the right marks for me.
Nice. Yeah, maybe just the time with your mom was probably a nice experience. So thanks, Lauren, for sharing that.
Okay.
We have been very, very lucky to spend. Oh, sorry, Kim.
No, go ahead. Go, Bob.
To take our kids to South Africa a couple of times. And you mentioned Napa. I always describe parts of South Africa like Northern California, Napa Valley, but like on crack. It is incredibly beautiful there. And the wine country is so much fun.
Wow, that's cool. I think Kim, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee this last year to celebrate my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. So it was awesome for everybody to be alive, to be together, that we could have that moment. Usually you kind of do these things sometimes like after somebody is. So just to be able to share in that together. I'm all about, for sure, like quality time and shared experiences. So it's something we'll forever remember.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I think post-COVID, I think everybody has kind of a different appreciation for these kinds of opportunities. So just to travel, one, and two, just where everybody, as you said, is alive, healthy. I loved what you shared. Thank you.
Jump in. I was trying to decide between Cancun and San Juan, and I realized that I travel very differently as I've gotten older. So I used to love to have a jam-packed itinerary and just go, 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 go. And that's what I did in Cancun. So I think though San Juan tips the scales because I was with a more mature group of individuals and we just kind of chilled and enjoyed the beach and the real community that is San Juan, and got to hang out with locals and things like that. And so, and I was also able to meet a lot of the women that lead so much of the culture and environment there. It was just beyond powerful. I was like, oh my gosh, like women are running things. Yes. So I think that tips the scales for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's never fun. You have to take a vacation after your vacation because you're so exhausted. You packed it full. I've done that too. So I get that.
I'll go next. This is the year of a big birthday for me, and so we've been planning
25?
Yes, so excited. So we've been planning for a while to go to Tuscany, and we were able to find a VRBO villa to share with a lot of people from across my whole life. And so far it looks like everybody can actually be there. There'll be like 2 weeks of people coming and going, from my family to high school friends, college friends, Los Angeles friends, Kansas City friends. So,
and we're all invited, right? We're all part of your life.
There's rooms for everyone. But
That's
it's the
awesome.
perfect combination of like be in a space where there's the perfect kinds of things for me, wineries, hiking, small towns with amazing food, and then all the
Hmm.
people I want to be around. So
That's amazing. When
very
is that? You said this year?
September, October.
Okay. Anybody else? This is great.
I'll jump in. I love traveling, so it's really hard to say where's my favorite place, but I celebrated a milestone last year. I turned 21 last year, if anybody's wondering. And I went to the Maldives. And when I say a dream, it's a dream. The waters, I mean, crystal clear, blue. And we stayed in an overwater villa, so you could see the fish swim through. I mean, amazing. So yeah, it's hard to even say that is my favorite because I feel like there's so many, but I love travel. I love experiencing other cultures and just learning new things and meeting new people.
I'm just going to ask. So I really don't even know where the Maldives is. Is Europe? I mean, where Asia?
That would be like Asia. It's in Lord, what's the waters? I'd have to look back on the map now.
That's okay. I can Google it. I've
But
heard of it, but I couldn't tell you where it is. Yeah.
yes, yes, but go look on the map and then look up some things.
Okay.
It's like hundreds of islands, but only like
Wow.
maybe 100 of them are like occupied. But you have to take the once you fly in, you actually take a water plane over to your island to stay.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Adam says the Maldives is southwest of Sri Lanka and India.
Okay, yes.
That's, yeah.
I know we stopped
Okay.
in Sri Lanka, so yeah, there was a layover.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Anybody else? We don't have to have everybody go, but if anybody else wants to, Bev, we're just sharing favorite vacation spots or upcoming trips, just in anticipation of warm weather.
I'll share real quick. So I have two that really stand out to me. One was a vacation and part of my master's studies. We went over to London and I did a special studies in actually special libraries. So not public libraries, which is what I do now, but something different just to learn about how other people do their thing. There's amazing libraries in London, of course, that do all different things. And we studied a medical library and lots of interesting things. But my biggest takeaway was I spent one day in London completely by myself, just exploring the city. And I really had never done anything like that before. And it taught me a lot about my own independence, which has really served me well. And then my favorite one, definitely by far, was a trip that we took with my dad, my mom, my sister, her husband, myself and my husband, all to where my dad grew up in like New York, upstate New York area on a lake, where he grew up. That was their like family getaway place. And so it's like his happy place. And he's talked about it his whole life. We finally were able to go out there and see his great uncle. It was just a really cool trip that, again, kind of reminded me of what Kimberly was saying. Just like everybody was there. We made it happen. It was pre-COVID. And I don't know that that would have happened now. So I'm so glad we noticed the moment and really took it. And yeah, so grateful for that.
That's wonderful. What's the name of the lake in upstate New York? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's Oneida Lake.
Oneida. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? And then we'll just roll right ahead. All right, Adam, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right, rolling right ahead. We want to set up our purpose, outcomes, and methods for the meeting. So really a primary focus is to continue our outcomes. We really need to get those locked in. So we're also going to talk about, revisit coalition structure, stuff like that, which is also part of outcomes. But I think really mainly we're going to be looking at clarifying what outcomes would reflect our purpose. And so since that was, it's a continuation of that. These are the reasons why it mattered from last time. So I wanted to see if they still apply from last week. So the reason we want to get our outcomes is that aligning on outcomes helps us to clarify which actions to take. No question mark needed there. Higher likelihood of sustaining the coalition after consultants have left. And it enables us to communicate to the wider community and confirm whether or not we're on the right track. Any other reasons why it matters to really get our outcomes clarified? And then, of course, from our purpose, we project over to what outcomes would reflect that we fulfilled our purpose of finishing our outcomes. What outcomes would you like to see today from the meeting? What would tell us we did a good job, we made great progress today?
We finalize our outcomes.
Perfect. All right, good. Thanks.
Also sharing organizations are in in the get started packet, coalition building
Good.
questions.
I think I'm lagging. Can you just say one more time because it broke up for me?
Oh yeah, the sharing out where we think we are as organizations in terms of the action to impact packet, the questions about where our organizations are in terms of collaboration.
Good. I just write down self-assessment. Was that work?
Mhm.
Okay. Good. Other outcomes. I would like us to deepen our insights about potential organizational structure, coalition structure. Is that all right to put there? Anybody object to that? Okay. And then in terms of how we would get there, if there's any other outcomes, we could come back to it. But generally the agenda for today, after we align, we're going to get you into small groups and continue that conversation about outcomes. And then we'll come back for a large group debrief. We're going to give you like 20 minutes. We'll see if that's enough. If you need more, we can look at that. But you know, that should be a nice, healthy time for discussion. Come back and spend another 15 minutes, but we can flex on that too before we take a break. Then we'll talk about the readings, about coalitions, governance, resource management, etc. Deepen our conversation about that. And then we'll talk about what comes next, methods. Once we clarify outcomes, then the methods are how do we go about producing those outcomes? And we'll get into another group breakout, do some plus deltas and adjourn. How does that look for an agenda? Any questions, concerns, suggestions? Will that get us to our outcomes? All right.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, take it away.
So, yeah, actually, we're not. Yeah, I'm gonna steal the screen and just draw everybody's attention to the outcome document that we posted. This was just a draft that we put together, kind of pulling together what we saw as kind of the main threads that you all had developed in your various groups, reading your outcomes. And so we felt like it might be helpful to just put together a draft for you to be able to tear apart. And so I'll talk through this just really quickly. And then what we're going to do is put you in breakout groups to essentially discuss these, decide whether it's catching everything that you wanted to catch for your outcomes, and to propose any changes. And then we would debrief on the other side as a big group. So again, we'll run through this really quick. The first and foremost is a sustainable coalition structure is established. I think that's sort of like a BIPNO, basic but not obvious outcome of our time together, and a real goal, an achievement that we need to be working towards. Having a sustainable structure in place for effective coordination of diverse Kansas City stakeholders to implement whatever vision we are creating for KC as a literate city. And then I kind of reframed the indicators more as illustrative. I think a lot of the brainstorming that has been done by you guys and your groups has been really helpful. But I think as we were looking at it, it started to get a little bit too in the weeds, to be honest, in terms of like, until we know what our methods are, it's going to be a little bit hard for us to set really specific, smart indicators for what we're trying to achieve. So for the indicators, I think it's still helpful for us to understand, to break down, you know, how would we operationalize, how would we measure the larger outcomes? But just thinking of them more as illustrative at this point, and then that would be something that we would revisit once we're a little bit further down the conversation with methods. So for coalition structure, illustrative indicators could be establishing bylaws with a governance system, establishing a centralized system for tracking data, and then of course just the outcome of, you know, demonstrating programmatic alignment or integration of the organizations in some way, and pursuing, you know, mutually defined citywide goals. So that's number one. Number two would be literacy professionals align on key concepts and best practices for literacy across the lifespan. So this is really, you know, getting into that shared thought bubble of everybody agreeing, you know, in terms of the professionals that are doing literacy work in Kansas City, agreeing what is literacy, you know, for example, a lot of that basic definitional work that we've done together, being able to expand that out to other stakeholders across the city, and not only definitional, you know, getting to best practices and other, you know, literacy related like frameworks that we would be working with across the city. Another major outcome could be community members are empowered as agents of literacy. This is kind of piggybacking on one of the outcomes that was focusing on awareness of community members, so understanding the importance of different categories of literacy, but, you know, taking that one step further. You know, what would it look like for them to actually feel empowered as agents of literacy? And this is something that we'd heard a lot from you all, particularly parents and families. How do we get them empowered, not only aware, but empowered to be able to, you know, teach their children, you know, outside of the classroom and that sort of thing, being able to actively contribute to the solution. So that's what this outcome focuses on. The next is Kansas City institutions are mobilized to support the vision of Kansas City as a literate city. And this is really just seeing all of the stakeholders moving together, pulling toward that shared goal. And it includes, you know, from government to nonprofit organizations to businesses. And a potential indicator could be, you know, demonstrating behavioral or mindset change according to these different sectors that you would be engaging. And then finally, Kansas City citizens realize the benefits of collective efforts to support literacy across the lifespan. So really this looks like, you know, them having, as you all have said, access to tools and resources to achieve language and reading success. And making sure that, you know, all of the different, you know, demographic groups that we're targeting have the supports that they need to achieve their literacy goals. So again, this is just a draft. As we like to say, this is a bit of an idea fashion show, and you're free to accept, reject, or adapt anything that we say. But we wanted to just give you kind of a workable draft that we could start tearing up as a group and go from there. Are there any just questions about what I've presented, anything that maybe you don't understand? We'd like to get more into the discussion and feedback in your breakout groups, but if there's any kind of initial questions based on this, please let us know. No, all seems clear. Okay.
The idea would be in your groups that you would evaluate these outcomes. Are these the outcomes? Do they prompt you in a direction that leads you to something else that you want? So the idea is to really clarify what we want to see result from all of our efforts.
All right. So we'll give everyone at least 15 minutes. We'll be kind of hopping around the rooms and seeing how the conversation goes. But we'd like for you to discuss these outcomes. To what extent do you agree or disagree? To what extent is it the full picture of what you were trying to achieve? You know, maybe taking another look at your purpose statement, your vision statement. Are these outcomes accurately reflecting what you've the work that you've already done envisioning. So give me one moment to create these breakout groups.
And does anybody need a link to the document? I'll put it in chat.
Okay. If we're ready, I'll go ahead and open the rooms. All right.
So what, did you put about 3 people in each group or
Yeah,
2
4
or
in each
3?
group.
Oh, there were enough for 4. Okay.
I have 3
That's good.
groups of 4.
Oh, okay.
I guess I could have done 4 groups of 3, but I didn't.
Oh, I counted 5 outcomes. That's why I was
Oh, well, I was not asking them to look at, like, to break up outcome by outcome. Did it seem like I
oh,
was?
No, I didn't think so.
I guess
Yeah.
I didn't
Okay.
understand. Okay. So it was just kind of, they can look at any of them or all of them. is
Yeah,
what
I'd
you're
like for them to look at
Okay.
them holistically.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was thinking there each of them would look at a different. Sorry, I think that's just what I assumed.
That's okay. I just
Never-
haven't
you never
mess up my
you never
explanation.
said that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking that. So, okay.
Okey-doke. Well, do we want to assign ourselves to rooms?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy. Well, I guess it doesn't matter because they're all talking about each one. So, yeah. I can't. I think you'll have to put me in a room. I don't think I can.
You could pick your own, but I actually am wondering, maybe like I'm just gonna let them, I'm probably just gonna let them do their thing for a while, you know, like I don't know. I don't know if I want to go into a room today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful for us to hear a little bit of the conversation on the other side, and catch things if it goes off the rails. But we can give them maybe 5 minutes to kind of get settled, and then
Yeah.
At least I'll hop around. I think also to keep tabs on how long people
What
need.
groups are doing, yeah. Good.
And when was the
So we have this
Time of the
scheduled
agenda.
till 11:10, but we started them about 6 minutes late, so we could go till 11:15 easy.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, if they're talking still, I would hope that I frankly would be disappointed if they didn't have a really rich discussion about it's so important, and like what we've given to them isn't meant to be like the answer. It's real, like you said, it's
Yeah.
meant to prompt. So
Yeah. One thought that I had, I still think we can kind of keep with the current agenda, and then kind of pivot as necessary. But if I thought Katina's comment was interesting at the beginning when she said, I'd like to discuss where everybody's at in terms of their organizational readiness to commit to a coalition. And so I think that will be an organic discussion that comes out of when we're reviewing the readings on coalitions. But it might actually, like, depending on kind of how that conversation goes, we could pivot to having breakout groups where they discuss that particular question. So that could come like right after a
that's
review
actually
of the
great.
reading.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. So the idea would be they would discuss more in depth. How does your organization feel about being in the coalition? For me, it's like ready, willing, and able. Are you ready to do it? Are you willing to do it? And are you able?
Yeah. So that might be something to just, I mean, we were already talking about having maybe a little extra time in the second half. So if you guys like that idea, just giving them even 10 minutes to kind of verbally process in their groups.
It's very important. I think so.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. And that will also, I think, hopefully, I don't know. In some ways it helps actually to kind of control the, not control, but like control the length of the conversation that will come out of the coalition readings, because if it's a whole group discussion that then goes off the rails, then it will like probably take a lot of time. But if we pivot it to small groups, then at least that will let everybody get a chance to talk and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like the able aspect is good because some of them are executive directors, leaders, but others aren't. So they probably need to get their organization to agree, their leader, their board. I don't know. I mean, not sure what it takes to officially sign on to a coalition. I mean, that's even worth a conversation, is it a organization, like a board decision? Is it executive director? I wouldn't think that just like a staff person could say, yes, we're signing up,
It's true. Yep. And it's like able is also like, do I even have the time to do something like this? And yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I know I told you, Adam, but just so you know, Tom, I'll only be able to join the call this afternoon for half an hour. But you and Adam are willing, or of course able to.
Okay. That's fine. Which are you able to join at the beginning or at the end?
Oh yeah, the beginning.
The beginning, okay.
First 30 minutes.
Okay.
One thing we were talking about would, not to put you on the spot right now, but if you'd had a chance to look at the data reading and like kind of how we might kind of start guiding everybody toward that.
Yeah, and I had a question about that. When were you thinking we would assign that for next week or like how soon?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the discussion is like, when does it really make sense to do that? And I mean, I think, we could start giving people readings and stuff on the importance of data and ways to think about data ahead of any real work that we do on data. But yeah, I don't see it as like a burning priority, at least not like next week.
Okay. I have started looking at it, but I had planned to have more of a full review by 3 o'clock today, so we could kind of talk about it.
That works great.
Yeah.
A very deep bark.
Yeah, she's our Great Pyrenees. She's about 140 pounds, so she's a big dog. Yeah. We've got our 3rd floor bathroom being torn up, so we've got people coming in and out. So it's just kind of been a little hectic.
She doesn't like the strangers in the house.
Actually, she's not terrible. I think she's more just like, I don't know. She's not even getting up. She's like laying. I can show you what she looks like.
Yeah.
She's just like laying in it. She's just laying in a chair. Right there.
Oh, doggo, you look very comfy. Yeah, I like how she
Like
blends in with the blanket.
Yeah. She's like a polar bear.
Very cute. Alrighty, folks. Well, I might hop around, but you all are welcome to stay here if you like.
I'll probably pop in a room, I guess. I'll do it too.
Okay, I'm going to room 1.
I mean, it's fine. I can just stay here, but I don't think I have breakout
Yeah.
room capable.
On the bottom, do you see where it says breakout rooms on the menu? There's like all those things like secure,
Yeah.
chat. Do you not see one that says breakout
Mm-mm,
rooms?
I don't have one. And it's fine. It's no big deal. I mean, I have a whole bunch of things, but nothing. I mean, I think April should have like shared, like put me in a room, or if I was co-host, maybe I would have the ability, but it's fine.
Oh, okay, that might be it. I can make you co-host, but
It's
here's
fine.
I don't want you to feel left out, Tommy the V.
Oh,
Let's just see if it fixes it. Let me just see.
okay. Yeah.
Make you co-host. I sent you a screenshot of like the menu at the bottom, and you see that it has like a little red number 1 on it in the text.
Yeah.
But let me.
Yeah, and I just don't have it. I mean,
That's crazy.
I would if, yeah, no, I think I'm just not.
I could put you in a room too.
If you want to, it's
You
fine.
want to? I don't want to force you.
Are you going to, if you're
I'm
going,
gonna go
I'll
to
go.
one. I will go to
Okay.
one.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
just stick me in a room. I don't care.
All right, let's see.
I can listen in.
All right, you got it.
Yep.
I'll go to
Room
you go to
2.
2, I'll go to 3.
Professionals.
All right, welcome back, folks. Just waiting for group 1, I think. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I enjoyed hopping around the rooms and hearing a little bit of everyone's conversation. I would love it if each group could, or 1 or 2 representatives could summarize, go bullet point by bullet point, or outcome by outcome, and talk through your observations. Any group want to go first?
We can, if nobody else jumps in.
Thanks, Kristen.
I'll start, but group, please chime in if I overlook anything. I think we really had kind of 2 main focus areas. One, and thanks to Katina for getting the comments actually on there for us. In the bullet point that says KC institutions are mobilized to support the vision of KC, we think it would be beneficial to remember that a lot of what we're doing here can be supported and informed by regional and national organizations as well, and not limit ourselves. So expanding the phrasing in that way. And then I think the bigger, we focused on more time on the final bullet point, KC citizens realize the benefits. A couple of things we focused on, some wording changes that would make this more about, or equally about, realizing the benefits, but also being empowered to act on that understanding, and really recognizing sort of their place at the table, so to speak. And with that, we thought that bullet point should actually be positioned up higher, as maybe the second point before we get into all the things that sort of smaller groups of individuals would work on. Let's focus on what we want for everybody first. Group, did I get everything?
Did you all feel like anything really was missing in terms of the overall composition of the outcomes?
I don't think anyone mentioned anything missing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Could the next group please go? Whoever would like to be the next group. Group 2. Who was in group 2? I think this was Jitem's group.
Was that our group? Was our group 2?
Yeah, Jillian, Jenny, Jitem.
Okay, we talked about everything, all the different bullets, what we kind of highlighted. You can see kind of Jitem's notes there. Do we need an MOU to talk about, you know, how are we going to really make sure that our partners are working together? Do we want to include people or agencies that aren't in the coalition as we talk about our, you know, main steering committee or our work committees, or, you know, how does that structure look? We talked a little bit about the bylaws outlining a governance system and kind of what needs to be in that, and how that's going to be kind of our guiding principles. I don't know what shared curriculum. I don't remember that. Jillian or Jatim, do you guys?
Yes, because we were talking about essentially if we're all having the same practice, this was under the data framework best practices. Like, what makes it best practices? Are we having like a shared curriculum? Are we doing things similarly? So just asking questions of like, what does that mean?
Perfect. And then open to more literacy professionals. When we were talking about, you know, the second bullet talking about literacy professionals, but we also want to make sure that we include members that are not only literacy professionals, but are other professionals. So making sure that we are consciously including them in the bigger processes, not just the whole. That makes sense. And then, yeah. Community members are empowered by agents of literacy. We were a little bit, is this the one? I guess the second one we kind of thought on a lot of, and it was a little bit difficult to kind of think through, but the communities are empowered as agents of literacy, and just kind of what does that look like, and are, you know, how are people contributing, not just the awareness of, you know, all of this stuff happening, but what's the, you know, getting it done portion look like in that area.
Jenny, I'll jump in a little bit on that too, because I think what Jillian was talking a little bit about was like how the citizens can actually contribute to the solution, not just like having an awareness that there's something to do, but how they can actively participate in that. And we thought that might be missing in the outcome portion. It was really good in the like overall description of that outcome, but down below that really wasn't addressed. And Jillian, please feel free to jump in if I got that wrong.
No, you guys are right on. It's, yeah, so what I was saying was that, you know, in the description, it says, Kansas City citizens are aware of the need and are empowered to contribute. So one of the bullet points below should talk back to that empowered piece. So what is the outcome? It's that they are contributing. It's not that they just know how to contribute, but that they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
let's see. And then for the last one, we talked about just making sure that our special populations are considered and there's programming for that success as well. Anything I missed?
Okay, great. Group 3.
I think that was us.
Yes.
We really didn't have, I mean, we just focused on the actual underlined portions. That was where our energy went. So, the only thing that kind of came to mind for me, which Tina wrote in a side comment, is just, we just want to clarify in our wording that we are addressing the same audiences in point 3 and point 5, I believe is the last one. Because in bullet point 3, we say community members are empowered. But then if you go down to 5, it's KC residents or KC citizens, yeah. So just maybe having like some consistency as to like, this is the same audience. And then we did agree, like, if there are some levels of like degree of importance, I think Kate pointed out too, we would also like for 5 to be moved up in our bullet points. And if I miss anybody, team 3, if I missed anything, please feel free to add. That was it.
All right. Yeah, Katina, go ahead.
All right, quick question. When you all were drafting this, and I know you were utilizing our notes to do so, and I'm assuming you were trying to encapsulate things in broad terms. So when you were thinking through and using the term literacy professionals, can you guys kind of tell me the train of thought that you all utilized in using that designation?
Yeah, so that's something that came across, I think, in our interviews actually, is as something that, you know, it's actually a pretty broad, you know, group of folks that intersect with literacy, you know, from educators to library professionals to nonprofits. So, you know, really almost empowering, you know, those professionals with a label, you know, letting them, you know, giving them, you know, a shared umbrella through literacy professionals. And then within that umbrella, you know, defining, again, as the outcomes trying to get to, defining, you know, a shared thought bubble for what we're all trying to do and getting coordination within the group. So everyone who has a role in, you know, advancing literacy in the city, you know, more or less directly, that would be kind of who we were thinking of. But I mean, it's definitely open to, you know, wordsmithing, or you all can really define that however you'd like to, however it's useful.
So I figured that was the thought. I think an unintended consequence would be people saying, well, I'm not a literacy professional, even though they contribute greatly to this conversation in the way in which we build a literate city, special ed professionals, people that focus on attendance, people that focus on restorative justice and discipline, things like that. But automatically, if they were to see this particular language, they would then think they weren't actually included when they very much are. And so I didn't want us to have an unintended impact by the wording that we use, because those people actually need to be a part of the conversation because it directly contributes to the attainment of literacy for our students and or adults.
No, I think that's great. And being sensitive to how that would be perceived is important. Do you all have a preferred rewording of that?
Not yet.
Not
I
yet.
don't.
All right. Well, I think that's something that we can flag. And again, at this point, these are internal. You know, these are not outward messaging, talking points or anything like that. This is just as long as we're clear internally on what these words mean, that's the most important thing that matters. But then there will come a time when we have to cross the bridge of how are we communicating them. So, but I think that's really important to flag now. And yeah, so thank you for doing that, Katina, is making sure that people can see themselves in this literacy professional label, which is something, you know, that doesn't, I mean, as far as I know, doesn't really exist. Like we would be creating a new category of people. Okay, but yeah, thank you for that observation. I think that's a great kind of overarching, kind of taking a step back. How, you know, how would this be perceived by the larger community? Are there other kind of larger big picture reflections on this list of outcomes? Do you all feel like it is a good representation of your vision statement, of your purpose? You know, if you were taking a step back and saying, what would thriving look like for you know, what the coalition is able to accomplish, you know, in Kansas City, advancing literacy across the lifespan, creating that KC as a literate city vision. Are these the major outcomes we want to see?
I can't overestimate how important this is for the work we do going forward, because the outcomes really are going to be what we will set our sights on and gear our efforts and resources toward. So yeah, first is, do you think it's a complete set? Do you think it's an accurate set? And then do you think it's in the right order too? Because I think Krista might have mentioned that. But I think also, like, yeah, would the order they're in be important to you all?
Seems like we've expressed that order is important to us. So then it would just be the question of how do we order them? And I think the most, we paid most attention to that very last bullet point, needing to be moved up to maybe be number 2 or number 3. So it's how do we do our work first, like really as this collective group, and then who are we doing it for and how are we involving them in the process and giving them shared ownership with us, perhaps. So maybe that transitions up to 2.
Well, and I think there was mention of sort of a, excuse me if I misunderstood, but maybe a combination of wording between, I think, number 3 and number 5. Citizens realize the benefits and oh shoot.
We messed with the order, yeah.
Sorry, I was just trying to do that in real time, but I think
okay, that's all right. Now I'm lost, but
okay, it's back the way it was. It's back the way it was.
Community members are empowered. Like those two, I think we've talked about kind of perhaps meshing together or at least being consecutive.
So number 3 and number 5, community members are empowered, and
I think so. I mean, that was the conversation we had, and it seems like it came up from somebody else.
Yeah, the distinction I'd want to make with those two is, you know, the community members is like essentially those who can be empowered to help advance literacy, I guess, for themselves and others, but kind of more outward facing. So like aware of the problem and, you know, able to take initiative and being part of the solution. And then number 5 is really more about the beneficiaries. They're getting the positive benefits of what everyone else is doing, or I mean, they're participants in that, but that's not necessarily the focus of the outcome. The outcome is that they're actually seeing these benefits. So for that reason, the distinction might still be valuable.
I think my understanding of some of the conversations we've had is that there's generally a view that we are all agents and we are all recipients. Okay. And I worry about distinguishing them as positioning people to not feel as though they are welcomed into the problem solving.
Oh, sure. Okay, I think that's really valuable feedback. Any other just kind of general observations? Again, I think we're probably not going to actually do it in real time here. I don't want to spend our time on that, but this is something that we as consultants could take back and try to integrate into another draft. Or if you all would like to, you know, be the holders of the next draft, you're also very welcome to. So if there are volunteers to do that, then we welcome that, but also we're happy to take that on ourselves.
You guys got it. We trust you.
Oh,
And thank you.
all right, guys. Well, great. Well, then I think we'll wrap up the discussion there. If there are any more thoughts on outcomes, you know, we can bring it up again, and feel free to send us any ideas that you have over the next week, and we'll come back with another draft. All
Good.
right.
I think y'all have earned a little bit of a break. We'll take 5 minutes. We'll come back. We'll talk about coalitions, the readings, and your reactions. So sound good?
Sorts of other links and kind of rabbit holes you can go down. So for me, it's been a lot of fun to see how you know, essentially, you know, the science of coalition building, that, you know, the established best practices, and then also you know, getting a glimpse of what other organizations have done as well. So I hope it's been good food for thought for everybody. So what we'd like to talk about today, kind of piggybacking on our discussion from last time when we were looking at the big, you know, the big list of 1 through 7 of how we were gonna, you know, turn into caterpillar goo and turn into butterflies, to use Adam's metaphor, you know, to what degree and all of that. I wanted to continue to the discussion on, you know, how that might be operationalized. What does governance for coalitions normally look like? And again, it's really, as you can see also from the reading, it's not one size fits all at all. You know, there's a lot of flexibility for how you can go about this, but there are kind of some general, you know, a general template, right, to kind of starter framework to work from. So I'm going to run through a little bit of that, and then we'll have discussion. Could you share the screen again, Adam, please? So the 3 kind of main pillars of a coalition that I seem to pull from the text was, you know, first of all, you need to have some sort of backbone support. This could be something like a steering committee of folks that are the main decision makers, or you could have something as formal as an actual, what they call a backbone organization that is implementing, you know, the core functions of the coalition. But essentially what it comes down to is, you know, there's dedicated funding for someone's job because, you know, running a coalition, you know, doing those core functions is real work and takes real time and should be compensated. One idea that kind of came through the text, and I'd actually noticed it in some of the brainstorming around outcomes too, is the idea of rotating leadership as a way to both ensure inclusivity and diversity of perspectives, but also so that no one organization is, you know, necessarily bearing the brunt of, you know, the drains on the time and resources that it would take to serve in more of a leadership kind of core capacity on the coalition. So that's an idea that we can continue to explore. So the steering committee, you know, steering committee or backbone organization, there has to be kind of a central, you know, decision-making body. From there, there's kind of general membership that have some form of obligation to the coalition that can be defined. And then finally, committees and working groups also seem like kind of a common thread across a lot of the different coalitions that would pull in general members and, you know, steering committee members on particular initiatives. So for example, you know, a curriculum or a best practice committee would focus on that, or a fundraising committee would focus on fundraising for the coalition, that sort of thing, and pulling in general members, but maybe even external experts or champions or supporters that are not coalition members to help with specific needs through these committees or working groups. So those are some of the elements of coalitions. I thought that the list that that the reading provided on the backbone organization, kind of some of the key, again, illustrative functions. It doesn't have to, you know, always fall exactly like this, but on the right of the screen there, we have the list of illustrative functions of a backbone organization. So first and foremost, of course, is administrative support. ensure partner agreements are signed, arrange meetings, take minutes, et cetera, et cetera. That's all real work and takes time. Capacity development for evaluation. So this is really focused on data, data collection, building out those data frameworks, training up other coalition members to be able to collect that data at a high level, creating, reports, analyzing the data. So that could be done by a core backbone organization. Galvanizing the coalition. So again, serving as this hub for all of the coalition members to come together and have dialogue, building consensus, recruiting or orienting new partners, etc. Strategic direction guidance. This is very much what we're working on right now. So developing iterations of strategic, planning documents, mission, strategy, goals, a work plan, and then of course holding people accountable to implementing the plan. Mobilization of funding, very important. So meeting with donors, advocating, writing grants, that sort of thing. Public will building, advocating for the coalition, again, developing messaging, et cetera, and policy advancement, which is something I know that has also come up in a lot of discussions about outcomes, is, potentially this backbone organization could serve as a advocacy for and kind of maybe think tank for new policy on literacy. So, any reactions or questions to just kind of those central functions and some of those key ingredients for coalitions? We can move on to the next slide. I wanted to show you all, there are all sorts of case studies that you can pull out, and there's all sorts of lessons to be learned from there. But I thought that this one was kind of helpful as we start thinking about coalition structures and governance. There were quite a few great stories that came out of the Community Mental Health and Wellness Coalition. They seem like a cool organization that's been doing coalition work for a while. But, some of the key points I wanted to pull out of this case study was, they noticed when there wasn't a coordinator, so they had a coordinator for a while and then the coordinator left and they really realized, what a huge job it was, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone here, but, when we have funding conversations, being able to advocate for the importance of a backbone organization, for this work is important. So the best use of the coordinator in this case was to organize the work, galvanize partner participation, manage the evolving evaluation efforts, and measuring outcomes. I also thought that it was interesting that they used like a rotational leadership model. So they had I like how it's worded. They transitioned into new leadership with the founding champions and longtime co-chairs stepping into an advisory role. So, just thinking about, this core group, if you all were to serve as some sort of steering committee, what would it look like to transition to, other people who are taking the reins? You probably would continue to have some sort of advisory role. So just kind of building out in terms of thinking about how we would build out, those decision-making structures, kind of thinking through some of those functions. I thought another important thing through here is the lesson learned on the critical importance of engaging in ongoing succession planning, grooming new coalition leaders so that the coalition can effectively manage the leadership transition. So again, just kind of more food for thought in terms of, what we might take into account, what are the ingredients to be able to establish, a governance system. Any reactions to the case study?
When I was looking at the first chunk of it and that, like it wasn't until that position was vacant for 6 months that they're like, oh yeah, we actually really need this. I think this group can relate to that because I know that the communication that had happened before the pandemic kind of fell to the side. And that, just like it took a lot of gumption to get us all back into the same communication space. after Kristen and I came on board to turn the page. And so I think that just like goes to prove that we need to have some kind of model, maybe like outside our individual organizations, that exists regardless of churn, regardless of you know, who is able to individually stay in the collaborative.
Yeah, and I would add another element to consider besides, you know, just how you collaborate, cooperate, work together. Another piece of this would just be thinking about a legal structure. I mean, I know that you're running the grant through, you know, Kristen's organization, but, you know, if you want to actually receive funding, I think you would almost need to establish a 501c3 organization. So that's just a whole nother layer of consideration, or just continue to, you know, operate as a, you know, as this is just a almost a piece of the a piece of sort of an extra thing that each of the organizations are doing, and there wouldn't be a separate legal structure. So that's just another element to think about.
That is one of the things, actually, that was one of the first questions I had. And I thought, is it a 501c3? Is it a 501c4? Especially given, I know Bev and I and Linda were at an event with School Smart, and several of the organizations that presented that are partners that have come together to kind of do this work are looking at different legal structures now, especially to free them up to start doing work around policy. And we have to understand and know that while 501c3 can do policy work, it certainly can be a substantial part. But I'm wondering with this particular group, and as we come together, I think policy is going to become increasingly important. And so the legal structure then is going to also be increasingly important for us to ensure compliance. And so, yeah. And then as I think about a leader, like rotating leadership is cool, but all of us have different, you know, models. Some of us work solo currently. Some of us have very lean staff. Some of us have larger staffs, or some are connected to national organizations. So it just kind of depends on what our capacity is. Or do we bring someone in specifically, compensate them, such as like Jana's doing with the parent-facing organizations? But then who are we looking to for that role? What are their strengths? What is like how we even coalesce around putting together, you know, a position description and what they're going to be held accountable to. And then I also thought about board, like, you know, is it going to be a governing board? Do we become the governing board or an advisory board? Like, what does that look like? So I think there's significantly a lot more questions are starting to pop up. I'm like, yikes. I love this though. I love this reading. I've been a part of some other coalitions and we did none of this work and we fell flat after a while. But now I know, like, it's like, oh my God, why didn't I have this information then? So this has been excellent in terms of giving us some foundational information that we need, I think, to continue to build and do it effectively.
Well, there's no doubt. I think you answered the question, Katina, around, you know, if this, and this is all going to be defined by the outcomes and the methods in terms of how much policy, you know, is the coalition going to embark on. In that case, I think 501c4 would be the safest place to be. You couldn't accept charitable donations then. I mean, if you're a 501c3, you could accept charitable donations. Donors could then receive a tax deduction, but the 501c4 would have unlimited advocacy ability. And so so if that really is a prime focus, then probably a C4 would make the most sense. And I would imagine most of the organizations here today are on the coalition currently are C3s. So to have a you know, to give you all more of an opportunity to engage in more advocacy, having a C4 would make sense too. But I do think it's an important consideration as we think about the structure and governance, and as Katina, you've obviously thought about too.
Yeah. And I mean, this discussion is just meant to raise, like, I know you said, Katina, oh, there's a lot of things that are popping into my head and there's a lot of things to think about. But I mean, the point of this discussion is to just start surfacing that. And it doesn't mean they all need to be done right now, but just to bring those to the surface so they're kind of in our collective consciousness especially as we're going into methods. As Tom said, it'll give us some direction. So don't worry, we don't have to do it all right now, but to be thinking about these things and surfacing what needs to get done. So that when we get to that conversation, we'll be able to really make some traction.
I do love the fact that as you look at the case studies, that some of these organizations evolved over time. So they got to a certain point and they realized they needed to evolve again in order to do the work more effectively. And then they got to another point, it was like, oh, wait, we need to evolve again. And so I love the malleability of it, being malleable. You know, that you can continue to see it as a living, breathing organization that will have different phases to it as it goes along.
Absolutely, I really love that. And that's something I wanted to bring up when we're going to come back to the big screen with 1 through 7 and take another look at that, but also thinking temporally in terms of like, we're, you know, by the end of, spring, we're not going to necessarily be totally, finalized in our final form, whatever we decide that is. Thinking in terms of stages is really most realistic, and that's also empowering. It's being able to break it up into manageable steps. Okay, great. Adam, could you throw the next slide on the board? Great. So I just, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I actually really enjoyed the reading around systems leaders, especially coming off of Adam's great positive leadership discussion. I saw a lot of overlap, and be curious what you all thought. But I think also as we're talking about leadership, governance for the coalition, I think this is just kind of important to keep in mind in terms of what that leadership could look like, what effective leadership for a coalition would look like. And, I think it was Katina that said, if we're making a job description for whoever's going to be the leader, this sort of, work would potentially be on that. So just running through it real quick, a focus on catalyzing collective leadership for the collective good. And yeah, I think the overarching message is, any individual in a coalition, regardless of their position, can be a systems leader, just like anyone can practice leadership as an activity. Some of the characteristics and skills that we're trying to get to: humility, ability to see different perspectives, commitment to cultivating the wisdom of the group, ability to attract and engage a coalition of the willing, and driving everyone to achieve these collective results. System leaders keep the vision front and center, facilitate healthy conversation, and give those in the coalition room to develop the strategies needed to get there. Some of the kind of checklist: demonstrate ability to see the larger environment, foster viewpoints beyond the status quo, shift coalition dialogue from reactive to proactive, help coalition partners embrace collective change. So a lot of this just reminded me of our inclusivity conversations, when we were talking about how do we make this a really big tent? How do we make everyone feel like they belong here? How do we also empower everyone to feel like they're a part of the solution? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of leave that there and ask, do you have what were your reactions when you read this? Does this resonate? Do you think that this is accurate for what we would be looking for in terms of leadership? Would you add anything, change anything? Any other parallels you saw with Adam's lecture? Can I get at least one? One comment? is this totally out of whack? Is this like totally not what you want to see in your leaders?
I'll jump in.
There
I
you go,
think
thank
that this really, I don't know, coincides with all of the things everyone was saying last time. Want to be able to look beyond just your own personal organizational goals and stuff to that collective vision. And I think last week someone brought up, what's his name? Simon Sinek, who talks a lot about infinite leadership. And I think that's what this is that, you know, we're not just in it for our own good, but for the collective good. And that's essentially what we're needing and wanting and looking for in leaders and members of the coalition, right?
And in addition to that, in Kansas City, there has been for some time now this whole conversation around ecosystem builders or systems level leaders. And I don't think anyone has really like said who those people are, what the characteristics of those folks are, or anything like this. So I think us doing this work, we can speak very clearly to what system level leaders are and ascertain like who they are and empower them to embrace that role. Like I look at us right here today, and like when I look at, and this is no shade when I say this, so just hold on. Kimberly and Lauren and maybe even Ellen within their organizations, they may not be the EDs or what have you, but they are in fact system level leaders. They may not see themselves as that, but I think doing this type of work elevates them in such a way that they are strengthened to do the work, are more empowered, like the same things we're doing for our parents and our families and all of that, to see themselves in that way so that they, you know, like all of us, I think need to build our confidence and operate maybe differently than we have previously within our roles, if that makes sense. All right.
I love that, yeah. And also kind of getting to that idea of, you know, some folks are in national organizations and some folks are libraries, and, you know, like we're all different fruit, you know, to a certain amount. And I'm not very good at analogies, Adam's better at this, but you know, we all bring something, and there's a place to serve a leadership role, and, you know, each person brings something really valuable to the table. So being able to leverage, you know, those assets and empower everybody to run with it. All right, cool. Well, Adam, can you bring up the last slide? Yeah, the last thing we wanted to do is just kind of throw this back up there, get any reflections based on, you know, some of this conversation, if anybody's had any thoughts about, you know, where they're feeling their organization's falling. That was a conversation, or that was some reflection exercise that we've asked you to do over the break. One interesting thought, actually, I'm gonna steal your thought, Kristen, but we had a conversation with Kristen last week for our regular check-in meeting, and she made the great point that, you know, it's not that everyone needs to, you know, not every organization needs to fit a certain number. So for example, you know, some organizations maybe that are, you know, a subsidiary of a larger national organization, you know, we're not expecting you all to dissolve and turn into, you know, the collective to, you know, automatically become a number 7. Maybe a subset of the organizations would become 7s, you know, hypothetically. And then, you know, other coalition members, depending on your specific needs and interests, you could fit in at a different level of integration. So, you know, we can play with the model in terms of, you know, we don't all have to get to a 7. We can think in terms of, you know, who's going to be working at a 3, who's going to be working at a 7. So that's also, you know, a way that we can play with our thinking around that. But yeah, I'll stop there and ask, and Adam, if you can just put it back up on the screen so we can have a visual reference. What are your kind of reflections on the levels of integration? Any new thoughts? And based on maybe your reflections from the week on your organizations, any new clarity coming?
I can try to take a stab at this. So I was just reflecting on maybe moments where I've seen this actually happen. And I feel like several of us have worked together to promote the summer reading program or reading over the summer. We usually have some kind of citywide event that happens every year. And so, yeah, I feel like that's around that 4 or 5 area. And that has always been a really great thing to be a part of. And so that might be like a moment where we've done this in the past that we could maybe look to and say it's been mutually beneficial for us and gets the word out on a really large scale and supports everyone in pulling things together, and our community responds well to it. So it kind of felt like something I could make a concrete analogy towards these numbers. And I don't know, that resonated with me. And I definitely think the library would be all in on like 4 or 5 for sure.
I'm just gonna piggyback on that a little bit, being the other library entity. You know, I mean, I think from the beginning, I've been a little cautious just because we are such a different type of organization than some of the other nonprofits. So I agree, like, you know, programming alignment and integrating some of that stuff is highly possible. But I keep kind of going back in my head to like, you know, it's definitely we're just a different type of organization that probably can't go all in the way that maybe some others are able to. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we can't integrate in ways that, whether that makes us a partner or a, you know, somebody to bounce ideas off of, or what, you know, definitely we want a seat at the table. But I think from the beginning, this has been kind of the piece that I've been struggling a little bit with, just because the library is kind of a different organization. So I would agree with Katie on kind of where we would be able to jump in, but still kind of staying on the sidelines a little bit.
I'll share that. Katina's right, 7 is scary. Because it's such massive overhaul that to me it's like it makes me appreciate the concept of like ongoing change over time. If a time were to come where we saw that in fact would make it function better, then that could happen down the line. But for me, 6 is a really powerful point on this scale. And now that I hear the libraries chime in, I can imagine kind of a 6 wrapped up in 4s and 5s, you know, where unified operations would give us the opportunity to hire that person and share that person, share the costs and the benefits of that person, whoever that leader is, and to maybe lower costs in a lot of other areas to allow us to afford that person, and to have that person on board, both as the leadership of this group and to support each organization's thinking around how do we effectively integrate programming and integrate and align programming across an increasing number of different types of organizations. So that's kind of where my thinking is today. Might be different tomorrow.
I think
When
for
I
me,
when
go
I
ahead.
ask, go ahead, just saying, because I've used a lot of space, so you go ahead.
No, Katina, I'm reading your questions, wondering if we're afraid to move to 6 and 7, because I'm still stuck on 7 in my mind because it's the cleanest. And I think like I think it was last week. The last time we met, I believe all of us, like the nuances of thinking of how would we track, how do we make uniformity in those areas, like, seem daunting, because we all have our independent organizations with our independent missions. And that is why I'm like, yeah, I can see 4, 5, 6, like right now as we're trying to figure it out, that we start some things, because we got to try it out before it's going to actually be implemented. But I do think with the mindset of moving into 7, having a separate entity that keeps all of our organizations in mind would be the best fit for us. And it goes off of what we said, I think it was last week, of like, none of us has been successful in the entirety of all of our organizations. So what we are doing is not working. And so that means something new has to be birthed or created to help us think outside of the boxes in which our organizations and institutions have already locked us in.
I guess I don't need to say anything. You took my thought. That's why I asked the question. And I will add this little piece. Oftentimes we'll read an article, we'll see something on TV, it'll be breaking news, where some amazing new this happened. They were able to innovate in a particular space where no one else in the country or perhaps in the world had did before. And I think we often look at those things as if like, oh, that's for someone else to do that work. We couldn't possibly do that work. And I'm like, bullshit. We're absolutely capable of doing that work and flipping something and turning it on its head. And yes, it is scary and messy and it's going to require a lot. But why not us? Like those people that do that work, like they're people just like us. Oftentimes maybe less smart. I don't know. But they do the work anyway. And so we don't always have to wait for someone to come along and do the work. I think to the point is like, yeah, if not us, who? Why not us?
Or
as intelligent and powerful and all the things. So yeah.
or feeling like you don't necessarily, because you don't have 100% of the qualifications or 100% of the pieces in place, you know, that keeps you from even trying. And instead of, you know, coming at it from a perspective of like, well, let's go out and hunt down the things that we need. The areas where we are more vulnerable.
This is where I get bold. Like, I'm good at leaning into the uncomfortable because I work in community. Like, it's always uncomfortable. So with that said, it's like, well, what could we get the best out of being uncomfortable? Like, what can we create that all of us essentially can negotiate within ourselves as individuals, but within those who we serve, to just say, I'm willing to be uncomfortable to help shift the collective a little bit more. And so that's my frame. And so with that said, though, right now, like when we're talking about the 4 and 5 and 6 right now, I'm like, I don't know this, like, because we are in literacy. But right now, I'm still thinking on, can we agree right now? Can someone throw out like 3 or 4 different curriculums that we all could like start looking at and reading through so that we could just like familiarize ourselves and get ourselves trained in it? So we can start doing the small as individual organizations to understanding what are the best practices, what are some curriculums that are out there, what are some assessments out there that we all could use and familiarize ourselves before we move closer to 7 to start that process to get us on the same page and start trying it so that we can come back to, while we have each other engaged, so we can come back to each other. Y'all, this is not working with our groups. Why? We need to train our volunteers. Okay, let's think about a collective volunteer train. Like, that's where my mind immediately goes to, is the operations. You're right, Katina. Don't last. It gets exciting because then if we're all uncomfortable, we all gonna have fun and just figure out, okay, that didn't work. Let's move to the next thing.
I'm all with the discomfort, so I'm right there. A lot of great things come out of being uncomfortable.
Is anybody else getting like tingly feelings from this conversation? That's very exciting.
Comfortable has allowed us to maintain the status quo. Like that's why we are where we are. We're in a system of education that has failed to evolve for 100+ years. Like, think about that. And then we gonna keep doing the same thing? Like, no, that's why I tapped out to begin with. Like, I'm not doing that. So if I ever even were a part of an organization that was like, no, you know, we're just gonna do this and we're gonna play it safe, I'm like, I'm out. I don't have time for that no more.
Katina, to piggyback, like even for myself, what I'm thinking of right now, what I think would be exciting, I don't know how to do this without having a long, long, long meeting. But to even delve into all of our organizations, what are y'all doing? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Like to even start doing that process, I'm just like, oh, I haven't thought about it. Like we have some of the keys. We just have been so close to our chest about, but this is what my organization does, not yours. This is our specialty. And so even putting all our cards out on the table, this is what we've done. Here's what our research has shown thus far. Because that in itself could help us craft what curriculum, what trainings, like what do we all need to be familiar with, so that we can start the conversation and move toward some change.
Which directly goes to perspective, right? When we look at that table, purpose, fit, time, capacity, support, and perspective, it says, are you able to commit to the long-term coalition goal, even when it does not directly benefit your agency? I like put stars all around that and highlight it. Because like that's something I think we really have to work through and just be honest. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. And you just go, okay, not a good fit right now. Like, but don't pretend either, because that hinders the work.
Kristen, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I just, this may sort of sound like devil's advocate, and I'm actually not trying to be that. I think what I'm pointing toward is, let's think a lot about the who of who can make that step happen. Because as I hear us talking, the thing that excites most of us, I think, is getting to actually tackle the work of changing how we help children become literate. And thinking about even level 6 or 7, after having founded 3 charter schools, is there will be a good 5 years where the leader doesn't get to focus on that, because there is so much work around the stuff that has to happen administratively, legally, the stuff. And it's not bad work. I just don't think it sounds like diving into curriculum choices and doing the stuff that we all desperately want to do. So I'm not saying don't think about doing that. I'm just thinking, like, think carefully about the who that would emerge either from us or we would bring in to do it, because it's a lot.
Yeah, the who, the governance structure, the funding structure, and
Yeah.
you know, as we get into conversations on funding, like really being able to level with funders that this is something that, you know, people need to be paid for their time, because it will be a huge effort, but potentially with a huge payoff, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And if we find the person that doing that jazzes them up as much as Jitem gets excited about curriculum sharing, that would be amazing.
It's not curriculum per se, it's just aligning us. That's what I get excited from. It's like, oh, we're not silos. Like, what can bring us together? What can get us to just like try, like to figure out what methodologies? And to me, nothing is better than trying it and just having conversations about, well, what worked for you and what didn't.
I think to touch on something that Jillian mentioned, to just have some kind of co-location, have some kind of hub, where we can, do some co-working and have some, I think, like, geographic memory of, the concept of, like, when you're in this space, you're doing this work, or like anytime I'm, if I'm going to take a test, I'm going to sit in the same seat in class that I sit in during lectures, you know what I mean? So just like, I think that's something that I think could be really, like, that's an actionable thing, that we can do, and having a hub, or like a version of, my wife works in the housing sector, they have the Beehive, where a lot of other, a lot of similar organizations work or share space or share a meeting space.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I think this might actually be a really good segue. We wanted to get you guys teed up a little bit for methods, which is what we want to dive into the next on our next meeting. Adam, I know that we just have a couple minutes. Would you be able to do a little primer on methods? And I think a lot of the ideas that we've been generating in this conversation, hold on to them, because we'll be able to really do all of this mapping out and, you know, assigning who does what where very soon.
Yeah, this is the really hard stuff. It is there's a field dedicated to it called organizational development, and it is about how do we answer these questions of how do we organize to be effective. And so under this field comes things we're familiar with, like strategy, structure of an organization, leadership, processes and teams and culture and values. These are all the topics that we know leadership are really important for effective organizations. And we also know that organizations are one of the reasons humans are so effective at rising to the top of the food chain. It's not because of our natural, you know, we have fierce horns or tusks or things like that. It's that we have the ability to organize. And sometimes we do it well, and sometimes we do it horribly. Sometimes, you know, organization leads to terrible outcomes, warfare and stuff like that. So how do we as humans organize effectively? And that's the study we're in. And that's the problem we're having. And essentially, what is an organization? In my view, this is so basic, and like you could debate with this, but essentially, I think an organization's job is to convert resources into outcomes. It's a way to kind of get to the BIBNO of it. The basic but not obvious is when you get down to it, an organization is effective to the degree it took the resources it had and moved it to valuable outcomes. And if it does so, then it's an effective organization usually. And if it doesn't do that, then it's ineffective. So what's between the spending of the resources and the outcomes we get? That to me is what I call generally methods, the how. So for me, I know I risk oversimplification when I get to this, but I genuinely believe that we can look at what it means to organize as three things: purpose, outcomes, and then largely and mostly and often to our detriment, firstly, to our detriment if we do this first, it's methods. And this is what everybody's focused on. What do we do? How do we do it? Let's, you know, when you start to separate human activity into these three pieces, you start to realize the degree to which this third one gets the energy and the focus and people. Let's get to it. How do we spend our resources? What should we do? Let's throw something at the wall. Let's get started. We can't just sit here, you know, that kind of thing. So I get it. But it's supremely important because, but first, we need to frame out what is our purpose. And so this is from last time, the purpose statement we aligned on, and not to say we can't refine it more, but this is our why. This is our origin. This is our how come we're doing this. And then when we're successful, the outcomes, these are the five that we talked about today, and we can refine those further. But essentially, we want to get to these five things. We want the citizens to benefit from this, and then the rest. I wanted to highlight that one first. So what we need to do is convert our resources into these outcomes, and the way we do it is via methods. And so I want to share a couple of things. This one's really childish, okay? And I have to admit this is homegrown, and if you know, and I just made this up. But it's a way of explaining, you know, what we're trying to do. So let's say this is us, and we want to get here. X marks the spot. We're lost, and we have to decide how we're going to get home. So we have three main strategies to choose from. We could go through the forest of extremely large bone-eating cats. We could go through the you know, the forest of giant snakes, or we could take the river. So strategies are very broadly worded ideas. So these are very general ideas. This one, this one or this one. And so we decided we're going to take the river. We decided that's the way to go. So that's a strategic decision. Of all the ways we can spend our resources, do we want to go through here? Do we want to go through here? No, we're going to use our resources to do here. Now, that's a very strategic decision. It defines how we're going to use our resources, but it doesn't tell us exactly how we're going to complete this strategy. Like, are we going to swim down the river? Are we going to ride on the backs of crocodiles? Are we going to, our main tactic is we're going to use a boat. So that breaks down our strategy into a smaller deliverable thing. And then we need to decide the actions, or what I would call the operations. And we get down to the level of, do we find a boat or build a boat? We get in the boat, we navigate down the river, we don't sink. And that gets down to the specific granular level. So the reason I use this illustration is just to help us see the hierarchy of the house. Let me clean this up real quick. Let me also shrink this down real quick. Wrong thing. And then what I want to return to then is, all right, how do we do it? Well, the highest level of a method is a strategy. So we want to determine our strategies. And usually I think there's 4 to 6 strategies. If you have more than 6, I'm a little concerned. If you have less than 4, I'm a little concerned. But strategies are very broadly directions for how we will use our resources, but they don't get us there. They don't get us down the river. We need to convert our strategies into tactics, and tactics are more of the plans for how we will convert our strategy into more specific actionables, which actually gets down to the smallest level, where tactics then are broken down into individual things you do, action steps, first this, then that. Okay, so this is our overall structure. And what I want to offer is that for all of this up here, where we're going is we want to identify, maybe I'll say our 4 to 6 strategies. I'm going to draw it a little, before I had it vertically, but I'll do it horizontally here. And so we might look at what are our different strategies for producing these outcomes. And each strategy would then be converted into the tactics, and each tactic would be converted into action steps. And by the time we're done, we would have the action steps spelled out very, very concretely, because the only thing that produces an outcome is an action. Your tactics don't produce outcomes. Your strategies don't produce outcomes. Your purpose doesn't produce outcomes. It's really only the actions. But what I want to say, and this is almost a point to dismount on and then get your reactions and then see where we want to go in between now and then, is there's a big difference between actions and motions. And most of what happens in organizations, I believe, are motions. And what makes something a motion is that, they look like actions because they both spend resources. Motions cost resources, actions cost resources. They both look like movement. They both make you feel like you're doing something. But what makes something an action is that it's tied to a tactic, and that as a tactic, it's tied to a strategy. And as a strategy, they're the collective set of decisions for how you'll produce your outcomes. And that's good because we know our outcomes will be a reflection of our purpose. So essentially, what makes an action different from emotion is purpose. And they look very similar. So I see a lot of people spend their resources on motions, and this is extremely wasteful. And I see a lot of coalitions do this. I see individuals do this. So I'll stop there. I know we only had a little bit of time, but that's where we're going in methods. This is the payoff, because if our methods align with our outcomes and our outcomes align with our purpose, then we have this beautiful thing that if I have an illustration here, yeah, I'll use this one. I call it the through line, which is what I talked about last time, from our purpose to our outcomes. But here's another look. If we were to break this down into wedges, then now we have a purpose, we have a strategy, which would be part of several strategies, but we're just looking at one strategy right now. And we see how this strategy could be broken down into tactics. Those tactics get converted into operations or outcomes. This is just another way to look at the same thing. I just made them gears now because I like to think of them as gears. You turn the little gears, they've turned the medium gears. You turn the medium gears, they turn the big gears. You turn the big gears, and if they're the right gears, they produce your outcomes. And this is how I think of methods. All right, I'll stop there. There's so much more I want to say, but any reactions initially to this? I'm trying to create a shared thought bubble in our head for what it will look like, you know, what our array of methods will look like. We'll organize them around some core strategies. And for that, I'm going to ask you all to look at the outcomes and then ask yourself, what are, I use the language is a little weird here, but I say, what are the factors necessary for producing the outcomes? Really brainstorm, and don't worry if it's a little detail or a big idea. Let's just brainstorm all of them, and then they'll organize into the right clusters. But yeah, I'll stop there. Reactions, and then we can talk about it. I don't know what we're gonna have time for, you know, plus deltas and all that, but yeah, reactions, and then we'll dismount with next steps.
I just want to say thanks for, putting that in our heads and having us think about that now and giving us a little time to kind of ponder that. That'll be helpful.
Good. Oops. All right, so to wrap up, April, Tom, do you have any suggestions? Should we just go right to our plus?
No,
Go ahead.
I think we've got 1 minute, probably less than 1 minute, actually 12:30 on the dot. So I think we ought to honor everybody's time and just adjourn, if that's okay, so we don't hold anybody up.
Yeah, everybody check Basecamp for homework assignments. But thank you guys for a great discussion today. I really enjoyed it.
All right,
Thank
see you
you.
next week.
See you next week.